today we're getting a little bit of angst out of my system. A bad memory of a bad video game that doesn't get enough negative attention, in my opinion. When you see lists of the worst video games ever, you always see the same old games. And this game, somehow, some way, never makes the list. This game makes Quest 64 look like one of the greatest games of all time. This game is disgusting. It's vile. It doesn't work. It's ugly. And more people should hate it. And I, of course, am talking about Virtual Highlight on the Sega Saturn. During my youth, 12, 13 years old, I don't know how old I was, it was a weekend. And when weekends come, you get to rent a video game as long as you weren't a little bastard during the week and messing things up. So what was a weekend was coming up. My mother took myself and my best friend at the time, Pecker Dupree, to the local video store, which was in a strip mall where there was a food line next to it. And I don't know what the food line has to do with anything. I kind of like Food Line. I used to shop there when I lived in the South. But we went to this place. It was our traditional video store. We always went there. We knew the employees and stuff like that. We're rummaging through the games. I had a Sega Saturn. The Saturn was dying out, so many places were clearancing it. I probably got it for like dirt cheap. I don't really remember how I got that Saturn, but I had a Saturn, and we're looking at the games, and we see this Virtual Highlight for Sega Saturn. Looking at the cover art, looks interesting enough. Looking at the back of the box, looks fantastic. Look at this big 3D world that you can move around in. This seems really cool. An adventure game with RPG elements in it. Sign us up. So that was the game for the weekend. That was a game we decided to rent. I came home, I put it in my Sega Saturn. We played it for about 30 minutes, and then I was like, this is horrible. So I went to my mother. I was like, yo, this ain't cutting it. We need to return this game and get something else. She was like, no, I'm not going back to the video store. I was like, I'm not being stuck with this game. She was like, well, you should have picked a better game. So now I'm like, what are we going to do? So the apartment complex we lived in was right next to a 4-lane highway. It wasn't like an interstate or anything like that, but it was a highway. Like the speed limit on it was like 55. And we lived at like the top of the hill. You'd go down the bottom of the hill. It would come back up, and about 1.5 miles, 2 miles away was the video store. And I was like, well, we're freaking walking to the video store and returning this. And we did. We did return it. Now, I returned to this game in my older stages, and nothing about it is good. Like, it's supposed to be an RPG-ish game. So what's the story? Some groundbreaking narrative? No. No, of course not. You play as a dude who has to save a captured princess, a damsel in distress. Look, Project Pat taught me a lot of things growing up, and one thing Project Pat told me was, don't save her. She don't want to be saved. Don't save her. So I you know, it was fine at the time, but it wasn't an interesting RPG narrative. But none of that matters. You know, you could play a game that has sort of a shallow story. I mean, really, a lot of Zelda games have shallow stories from time to time, but the gameplay always excels, and that's what always drags you in. The gameplay in this game is horrible. I don't even know if you could really call it gameplay, because that sort of insinuates that you feel like you're in control of this game. The frame rate has to be like 10 frames per second, if that. You can literally count them on your hand. You get put into a random area on the map. There's no guidance. There's no anything. You're just trying to figure out stuff. I remember the first time. This is the instance that made me want to return the game. I remember the first time I booted it up. They put me in the middle of a forest. I'm like, all right, figure this out. You know, I'm kind of smart. I start walking around, and this tree, this two-dimensional, flat, disgusting tree starts attacking me, and it kills me. I got killed by a biting tree. Like, this is idiotic. This is not good gameplay. This is not a fun gameplay mechanic to get eaten by a tree. Now, eventually you come across different weapons and stuff like that, potions to heal you, basic stuff like that, but it's such a confusing game. And the thing that really holds the game back, more so than the gameplay, is the performance of the game. Because like I said, it's very choppy. It's a good 10 frames per second when the game is running well. But these graphics are abysmal. They try to do a 3D world with 2D sprites, which has been done before. It was done years before this game with a game like Doom. Doom had 3D environments with 2D characters. It wasn't until Quake until we had 3D environments and 3D characters. So this can be done. This can be done in a reasonable way. But this game fails to do anything like that. This game fails to do anything like it sets out to do within these graphics, and it's ridiculous. There's no landmarks, there's no mini maps, there's no, you know, like objectives, like, okay, this is where you're supposed to go, this is what you're supposed to do. Like, there's nothing. The combat feels horrible. It feels like it's more based on luck than skill, which, you know, that's not a good thing. Item management, Jesus Christ, item management is terrible in this game. It's terrible. Trying to figure out and navigate through all these menus is ridiculous. Now, I will give the game a touch of credit, because I'm not a negative Nancy just for being the sake of a negative Nancy. The audio in the game is fine. The music in the game is fine, if not solid. You know, I'll say it's solid. It helps set the tone of what should be a fun game, but it's not. It's clunky to play. The visuals are terrible. Everything blends together. The frame rate is atrocious. The story is paper thin. There's no sort of, you know, helpful navigation or anything like that. You're literally just thrust into this world where it randomizes where you land every time you play. So it's not like you could be like, oh, okay, well, I died here, but this is the way I went. I'll make myself a little map. No, screw you and your little map, because this game's not going to let you do it. Okay, this game is going to make you suffer throughout it to try to find your way through this moving. I didn't even talk about moving your character. He hobbles like he took a dump in his pants, and he's like, I need to find some toilet paper or some bushes, you know, some leaves or something like that to alleviate this pain. Like, he moves from side to side like this. Like, it's so janky. I don't know how they played this game and thought, you know what, this is a son of a bitch right here. This is gonna make us some real money. Ship it, boys. This 3D open world adventure on the Sega Saturn. And I get it. Some of this stuff was probably technical limitations, but you're supposed to work within technical limitations. If a system can't do something, or a system isn't capable of doing something, don't do it. Don't do it. It's as simple as that. There were plenty of 3D games on the Sega Saturn that ran well. The Alien Trilogy runs well, and that's a hell of a lot better looking game than this game ever was. So it behooves me that Virtual Highlight is not thought of as one. Maybe because people didn't play it, and that would be understandable. But I feel like more people need to talk about this. It took years for the angry video game nerd James Rolfe to make a video on it. Like, James, where were you during this game? What were you doing? Making a film? Because I wasn't making. Actually, I was making films at that time. I'll tell the story about The Gold Bug by Edgar Allan Poe, which was for an 8th grade assignment where I got hit by a car, and it was a good movie though. I was making movies, but I was also playing Virtual Highlight on the Sega Saturn. Probably the start of my heart problems was from that game, and the sheer disappointment in it, and walking in that hot North Carolina sun back to the video store to return that piece of shit. Burn in hell, Virtual Highlight, right next to Quest 64, but I hope you're on a deeper level of hell. I hope you're on the deepest level of hell, burning alive. Let me know if you've ever played Virtual Highlight on the Sega Saturn. If not, don't. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.